Marielle's excitement about her first pregnancy was uncontainable, until her routine checkup took a harrowing turn. As the doctor maneuvered the ultrasound wand, his face grew increasingly pale, hinting at an unspoken terror. Marielle's joy quickly transformed into anxious anticipation. When the doctor finally spoke, his voice trembled as he revealed the shocking image on the screen. Marielle sat in the waiting room, gently rubbing her growing belly. Every movement, every flutter, filled her with hope and excitement. The ultrasound was supposed to be routine, a chance to glimpse her baby and hear its heartbeat. As her name was called, she felt a twinge of nervousness, the kind that always came before seeing the doctor, but she brushed it aside as first-time jitters. Today was going to be special. The sonographer's smile was comforting as she dimmed the lights and spread the cold gel across Marielle's abdomen. Marielle turned her head to see the screen, hoping to catch the first glimpse of her baby's tiny form. But as the ultrasound wand glided across her skin, the technician's expression changed, subtly at first, then unmistakably tense. "Everything okay?" Marielle asked, her voice cracking just slightly. The technician forced a smile and said, "I'll be right back," before swiftly leaving the room. Minutes felt like hours as Marielle lay alone in the darkened room, the machine still humming beside her. She kept her eyes on the screen, trying to make sense of the blurry shapes and patterns. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was normal for them to step out like that. But the unease gnawed at her, growing with every tick of the clock. When the door finally opened, it wasn't just the sonographer. Dr. Kendrick, her obstetrician, followed closely behind. Dr. Kendrick's eyes met Marielle's for only a moment before they darted away to the screen. He didn't offer the usual pleasantries, no soothing words or small talk. He quickly grabbed the ultrasound wand and began scanning her abdomen with rapid, almost frantic movements. Marielle watched as his face contorted into an expression she'd never seen before, one that made her heart race. "What's wrong?" she whispered, though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. Dr. Kendrick's hands were steady, but Marielle could see the tension in his jaw. "I need to check something," he said, barely above a murmur, as if afraid to speak louder would make things worse. The room felt colder, the silence more suffocating with each second that passed. Marielle's eyes fixed on the screen, trying to catch any sign of what had drawn his attention. But all she could see was the grainy, swirling black and white shapes that told her nothing. The doctor paused, his fingers frozen over the machine's controls. Marielle could see his Adam's apple bob as he swallowed hard, his eyes still locked on the screen. "I'm going to refer you to a specialist," Dr. Kendrick finally said, his voice trembling ever so slightly. He hardly looked her in the eyes. "There's something I need you to get checked immediately. It's important." Marielle's heart pounded as she dressed, her mind racing through every possibility. A specialist? For what? Was her baby in danger? She tried to steady her breathing, but the image of Dr. Kendrick's pale face kept flashing through her mind. As she left the office, clutching the referral paper in her hand, she felt like she was walking through a fog, one that grew thicker with every step. At home, Marielle struggled to mask her fear as she told her husband, Luke, about the appointment. "They said it's just a precaution," she lied, trying to convince herself as much as him. Luke, ever the optimist, wrapped his arms around her and kissed her forehead. "I'm sure it's nothing serious," he said, with the calm confidence she envied. But Marielle could hear the small tremor in his voice, and it sent a shiver down her spine. Days later, Marielle found herself in another waiting room, this one stark and sterile. She could barely sit still as she waited for the specialist, her fingers twisting the hem of her sweater over and over. When the door finally opened, an older woman in a white coat greeted her. "I'm Dr. Rowan," she said, her voice warm yet professional. But the warmth did nothing to thaw the icy feeling in Marielle's chest. Dr. Rowan wasted no time, getting straight to the ultrasound. "I understand you were referred by Dr. Kendrick," she said as she prepared the machine. Marielle nodded, feeling a lump form in her throat as the gel was spread on her belly once more. The hum of the machine filled the room as Dr. Rowan began her examination, the wand gliding over Marielle's skin in slow, deliberate strokes. Then, for the second time in days, Marielle saw it, the look of shock, fear, and confusion on a doctor's face. Dr. Rowan steadied herself, her face losing all color as she processed what she was seeing. She quickly exited the room, leaving Marielle alone with nothing but the eerie hum of the machine. Marielle's eyes darted between the screen and the door, dread settling into her bones. The seconds felt like hours, and she willed herself not to panic, but the knot in her stomach tightened. What on earth had Dr. Rowan seen? Marielle's mind raced, trying to decipher the unreadable expression before Dr. Rowan rushed out. She heard hurried footsteps outside before the door flew open. A younger doctor stepped in swiftly, introducing himself as Dr. Patel. He took over the ultrasound without hesitation. "Hang tight, Marielle. Let me take a look," he said, his tone brisk but kind. His eyes narrowed at the screen, and Marielle held her breath, bracing herself for whatever came next. Dr. Patel adjusted the wand, peering intently at the monitor. He found the spot that had shocked Dr. Rowan, and his eyes widened, mirroring her earlier reaction. He quickly exchanged glances with the nurse supporting him. The nurse nodded and swiftly handed Marielle a piece of paper with a phone number scribbled on it. "We need you to contact this specialist immediately," Dr. Patel said, his voice tinged with urgency. Marielle's heart pounded harder. "You need to follow up with a specialist immediately," Dr. Patel urged, before bustling out of the room. As Marielle dressed, the nurse offered an apologetic smile, but withheld any explanations. She felt an agonizing mix of confusion and fear. Dr. Patel's hurried demeanor did nothing to calm her nerves. As she gathered her things, Marielle glanced at the nurse, hoping for answers. But all she received was a sympathetic look and silence. Marielle left the clinic feeling more anxious than ever. Her phone buzzed incessantly with messages from Luke, but she barely glanced at them. She couldn't handle his concern right now, not without any concrete answers. Her thoughts were fragmented as she tried to fathom what the specialist might tell her. Each vibration from her phone felt like a jolt, a reminder of the dread that loomed over her and her unborn baby. Outside, the world felt surreal. Each step Marielle took felt heavier than the last. She turned to look back at the clinic, its sterile facade now filled with ominous undertones. Marielle took a deep breath, trying to summon the courage to move forward into the unknown. The specialist's number burned in her hand. She knew she had to make the call, but the fear of the unknown paralyzed her momentarily. Days blurred into a haze of phone calls and appointments. Marielle moved mechanically through each day, her mind fixated on the looming specialist appointment. She was scheduled for more tests, each one more invasive than the last, leaving her emotionally and physically drained. The uncertainty gnawed at her, making each day blend into the next. Her life had become a series of waiting rooms and clinical settings, a stark contrast to her once joyous anticipation. Luke stood by her side each time, his support unwavering, though concern etched deeper into his face with each passing test. Marielle tried to focus on the mundane tasks of daily life, but the cloud of uncertainty followed her everywhere. She found solace in Luke's presence, yet the worry was a constant companion. She noticed his attempts to stay strong for her, and it only made her more determined to face whatever came next. Each night, Marielle lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to Luke's slow, rhythmic breathing. Her mind swirled with thoughts of the upcoming specialist appointment, countless what-ifs playing on a loop. Her family called often, sensing something was wrong, but she offered little detail. She couldn't bring herself to voice her fears, not until she knew more. The nights were the hardest, the silence amplifying her anxiety and leaving her feeling utterly alone. At work, her colleagues gave her sympathetic looks, which only deepened her isolation. She could see their concern, but no one knew what to say. Her phone finally buzzed with an important call, the specialist's office. They scheduled her for an early appointment the next morning. The weight of that call brought a brief sense of relief, yet it was quickly replaced by a fresh wave of anxiety. Tomorrow, she would finally get some answers. The night before, Marielle could barely touch her dinner, pushing the food around her plate. Luke squeezed her hand, offering a silent comfort. He kept trying to make small talk, discussing baby names and nursery ideas. But Marielle's mind was elsewhere. The unease was palpable, casting a shadow over their usually cheerful conversations. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the sense of impending doom that loomed over them. Marielle wished she could share Luke's optimism, but her fears loomed large. In the specialist's office, the environment felt even more clinical, a stark reminder of the seriousness of her condition. The walls were lined with medical posters, and the sterile scent of antiseptic filled the air. Luke's reassuring smile did little to calm her nerves. They sat in uneasy silence. The only sound was the ticking of the wall clock. The new specialist, Dr. Patel, wasted no time, ordering another round of high-tech ultrasounds. Marielle felt a lump in her throat as the cool gel touched her skin once again. The wand moved methodically over her belly, the image of her baby flickering on the screen. Dr. Patel's focused expression offered no comfort. Every time his brow furrowed, Marielle's anxiety spiked, wondering what he was seeing that kept his eyes glued to the monitor. Luke hovered nearby, his tension palpable. The room was silent except for the steady beeping of the machines and the hum of the ultrasound. He reached out to squeeze Marielle's hand, but she barely noticed, her eyes fixed on Dr. Patel. The seconds felt like hours as they waited for the specialist to say something, anything, to break the overwhelming silence. Each pause in Dr. Patel's movements made Marielle's heart race faster. Dr. Patel's face remained a mask of professionalism until an unmistakable flicker of concern broke through. He paused the scan, turning to Luke and Marielle with a grave look. Marielle's pulse quickened as she searched his eyes for answers. The room seemed to close in around them, the silence now deafening. Luke tightened his grip on her hand, silently urging Dr. Patel to speak and end their torturous wait for news. "We need to admit you to the hospital immediately," Dr. Patel instructed. Marielle's heart dropped, but she nodded, feeling the room close in around her. Luke's face tightened with worry, though he tried to remain calm. Dr. Patel's tone left no room for questions, the urgency clear. Marielle felt a knot tighten in her stomach as she realized the gravity of her situation. There was no time to waste. They left the office with instructions and an overnight bag hastily packed. Marielle felt like a spectator in her own life, watching events unfold with a sense of detachment. Luke handled the logistics, speaking with the receptionist and arranging the transportation. Marielle's mind was numb, unable to process the rapid changes happening around her. Each step toward the car felt surreal, as if she were walking through a dream she couldn't wake from. Luke's hand never left hers as they made their way to the hospital. Once admitted, Marielle found herself in a private room with a view of the bustling city below. The contrast between the calm interior and the vibrant life outside was jarring. Luke busied himself arranging their things, trying to keep occupied. Marielle lay back on the bed, staring out the window, feeling the weight of her reality settling in. Nurses and doctors streamed in and out, each conducting tests and discussing findings in hushed tones. The atmosphere was tense, every interaction carrying a weight Marielle couldn't shake. She tried to listen to the medical jargon, hoping to catch a hint of what was happening, but it only fueled her anxiety. Luke stood nearby, observing every move, asking questions when he could. Each test felt like an eternity, her mind racing with possibilities. She overheard snippets of conversations, catching words like rare condition and multiple consultations. The uncertainty was eating away at her, the unknown factors breeding new fears by the minute. Marielle's mind spun with questions, each answer seemingly more urgent than the last. Luke tried to distract her with light conversation, but his efforts were in vain. The hospital room felt like a prison, each minute stretching unbearably as they awaited more news. Marielle lay on the examination table as specialists from various fields examined her one after the other. The sheer number of doctors was overwhelming. Each offered their professional opinion, rattling off medical jargon that made her head spin. Terms like anomaly and parasite floated around, each one more frightening than the last. Marielle tried to ask questions, but her own voice was lost in the sea of expert analysis, leaving her feeling more confused than reassured. Luke did his best to keep the mood light. He brought books, movies, and even Marielle's favorite snacks to distract her. Despite his upbeat exterior, his eyes betrayed his mounting worry. At night, hospital sounds filled the room, amplifying Marielle's anxiety. The repetitive beeping and distant chatter made it hard to sleep. Luke held her hand, whispering reassurances, but Marielle could feel the tension in his grip. As days turned into weeks, Marielle prayed for answers. She needed clarity, something that would offer a way forward. Each day felt excruciatingly long as the team of doctors worked to unravel the mystery. She clung to every word, hoping for a breakthrough. Luke joined her in these prayers, though he tried to remain stoic. Both of them needed some direction, something to quell the growing fear that loomed over them. A breakthrough finally came when a new doctor, Dr. Evans, joined the team. He was a cardiologist with a keen interest in Marielle's case. Dr. Evans reviewed her file and conducted several detailed echocardiograms. He seemed different, more focused, more determined to get to the bottom of her condition. His meticulous approach gave Marielle a small sense of hope that maybe, just maybe, an answer was within reach. Dr. Evans gathered Marielle and Luke to explain his findings. He detailed the urgency of monitoring both Marielle's and the baby's heartbeats, pointing out anomalies that needed immediate attention. Marielle's heart pounded as she listened, the gravity of the situation sinking in. There was a new kind of fear in her eyes, one that Luke quickly noticed. Dr. Evans outlined the possibilities, each more daunting than the last. With a heavy heart, Dr. Evans discussed the surgical options available. The risks involved were significant and brought tears to Marielle's eyes. The thought of surgery terrified her, but amidst the gloom, Dr. Evans offered a glimmer of hope. He believed that if managed with care, they could carry the pregnancy to a safer term. His optimism was a small light in the darkness, something Marielle desperately needed. Marielle and Luke found themselves in yet more consultations, this time with neonatologists. The complexity of the medical web seemed to grow with each meeting. Luke became a fixture at the hospital, working remotely from Marielle's room. He was a constant presence, offering support and trying to stay strong despite the mounting pressure. Each meeting added another layer of information, each more critical than the last. Luke took it upon himself to update their families. He filtered out the scariest details, trying to maintain a sense of calm. Marielle stayed strong, her determination unwavering. She knew she had to face whatever lay ahead for the sake of her unborn child. Luke's conversations were filled with reassurances, though his eyes told a different story. He was scared, but he couldn't show it. Not with Marielle, depending on him. Each consultation left Marielle more informed but equally terrified. She listened intently, clinging to every word from the specialists. The information was often overwhelming, yet she held on to the hope that Dr. Evans's optimism would prove justified. She knew the road ahead was fraught with challenges, but the thought of her baby kept her going. Luke was her rock, though she could see the strain in his eyes. The weeks felt like a roller coaster. Some days brought good news, like stable heart rates and improved fetal movement. Those moments of relief were precious, but they were often short-lived. The emotional ups and downs took their toll on Marielle, but she stayed focused on the end goal. Each small victory was a beacon of hope, a sign that maybe, just maybe, they could get through this as a family. Every day brought a new challenge. One morning, Marielle woke up with a strange pain she couldn't explain. Dr. Evans ordered more tests, each one bringing a kaleidoscope of results that confused and frustrated everyone. The nurses and doctors rotated in and out of her room like clockwork. Their faces grew familiar, almost like family, but their expressions were always serious, never giving away too much. The gravity of the situation weighed heavily on everyone. Marielle's body was sore from the constant pokes and prods of the medical staff. Her mind buzzed with too much information to process. Luke, sensing her distress, arranged for her family to visit. Their familiar faces and warm hugs were a brief respite, but every visit also served as a reminder of what was at stake. Her mother would break into tears, and her father's stern face betrayed his worry. Life outside the hospital seemed like a distant memory, something Marielle could hardly relate to anymore. Her phone buzzed with messages from friends and colleagues, filled with well wishes and words of encouragement. She read them all, each one a small light in her otherwise dark world. Still, her reality was confined to the 4 sterile walls of her hospital room, making the outside world feel increasingly foreign and unreachable. Though she appreciated the outpouring of support, Marielle's focus was solely on bringing her baby into the world safely. Spiritual advisors began to visit more frequently, offering comfort through prayers and words of encouragement. They became a source of solace, their calming presence helping her feel grounded amidst the turmoil. Despite the growing spiritual support, Marielle knew that faith alone wouldn't carry her through the challenges ahead. The hospital's pastoral care department became a refuge for both Marielle and Luke. The pastoral care team brought a different kind of comfort, one that didn't come in the form of medical jargon or charts. Instead, it came in kind words, prayers, and brief, comforting visits. These moments provided Marielle with brief respites from the unending stream of medical procedures and tests, offering her a chance to breathe and find inner strength. As the pregnancy reached a critical stage, discussions about delivery options became frequent. Dr. Evans and his team gathered in Marielle's room to prepare her and Luke for what lies ahead. Each conversation was filled with cautionary notes, but also a sprinkling of hope. They laid out the risks involved with various delivery methods, making it clear that every option had its pros and cons. The gravity of these decisions weighed heavily on Marielle. The plan was to induce labor when the time was right, ensuring that every step would be meticulously monitored. Dr. Evans stressed the importance of Marielle being in optimal condition. The risk of complications was high, and they needed every advantage they could get. Luke listened intently, his hand never leaving Marielle's. The room was filled with a mix of hope and worry, each person understanding the critical nature of the plan. With the plan in place, the medical team prepped a sterile delivery room well in advance. Surgeons were on standby, ready to step in at a moment's notice. The atmosphere in the hospital was tense, each procedure meticulously planned to reduce risks. Marielle could feel the tension in the air, every glance from the medical staff carrying a sense of urgency. Luke stayed close, his presence a constant source of strength. Marielle's emotions swung wildly between hope and fear. Each day was a new challenge, a new test or procedure that brought her closer to delivery. Luke became her rock, his calm demeanor providing a buffer against the storm of uncertainty. His quiet confidence helped Marielle stay focused, even when doubt crept in. She knew she couldn't do this without him, his unwavering support being the anchor she desperately needed. The specialists briefed Marielle and Luke daily, making sure they were aware of every detail. They attended presentations on neonatal care, surgical procedures, and emergency protocols. The information was dense, often overwhelming, but crucial. Marielle and Luke absorbed it all, asking questions and seeking clarity wherever possible. Each briefing added a layer of understanding, making them more prepared for the inevitable challenges ahead. Despite the fear, they felt a growing sense of readiness. The weight of the knowledge was both daunting and comforting. Marielle placed a protective hand over her belly. She focused her energy on what lay ahead, determined to stay mentally strong. She kept replaying the briefings from the specialists in her mind. Luke helped, reinforcing their resolve with his unwavering support. Marielle felt as ready as she could be, prepared to face the imminent delivery with every ounce of bravery she had. The day finally came, filling their room with nervous anticipation. There was a lingering quiet before the storm as Marielle was prepped and wheeled into the delivery room. Doctors and nurses surrounded her, each person a cog in the well-oiled machine of healthcare. The beeping machines and sterile environment felt surreal. She felt Luke squeeze her hand one last time before being escorted to her side, masked and gloved. The rhythmic beeping of high-tech monitors filled the room, tracking every one of Marielle's vital signs. Luke stood by her, masked and gloved, looking every bit as ready as she felt. His eyes met hers, offering silent encouragement and undeniable love. The moment was finally here, the one they had both been preparing for with equal parts dread and hope. The medical team moved with calm precision, each action purposeful and coordinated. The induction process began, sending waves of physical pain through Marielle's body and emotional turmoil through her mind. It was all too real now. She followed the nurse's instructions, focusing on her breathing. The medical team worked like clockwork, each member playing a critical role. Luke's voice anchored her, his words soothing her frayed nerves. Time seemed to stretch as Marielle endured the contractions, each one bringing her closer to meeting her baby. Hours turned into an agonizing blur. Every contraction felt like an eternity. Marielle clung to Luke's hand, finding strength in his presence. Dr. Evans kept a close watch on the heartbeats displayed on the monitors. His face was a study in concentration. Every second counted. The room bustled with controlled chaos, each beeping monitor and murmur adding to the atmosphere. Marielle breathed deeply, knowing they were inching closer to the moment of truth. The air in the room grew thick with tension. Every medical professional moved with heightened awareness, ready for any surprise. Marielle focused on her breathing exercises, blocking out the busyness around her. The anticipation was palpable, so thick it almost felt touchable. Her contractions came harder and faster, each wave bringing more pain but also more progress. Everyone, including Marielle, was prepared for the unexpected. The stakes had never been higher. Luke's hand became her lifeline, his soft words like balm to her frayed nerves. His calm reassurances gave Marielle the courage to face each wave of pain. This was the crescendo of their journey, the moment they had been fighting for. Amidst the flurry of medical activity, their bond was the constant, a beacon of hope and love. Every word Luke whispered into her ear strengthened her resolve to bring their baby into the world. With each agonizing push, Marielle felt closer to the final moment. She dug deep, finding reserves of strength she didn't know she had. The monitors began to emit a series of urgent beeps, the noise heightening the tension in the room. Dr. Evans reacted swiftly, his eyes never leaving the screen for even a second. Luke's encouraging words became a steady rhythm that pushed Marielle forward, each syllable matching her breath. A second later, Dr. Evans expertly pulled out a small, squalling form and swiftly swaddled it. The nurse took the baby, and Marielle barely registered the first cry when another, even smaller cry echoed through the room. Before she could process what was happening, the beeping on the monitors spiked again. The room held its collective breath as Dr. Evans turned his attention back to Marielle, his hands moving with practiced precision. Marielle's eyes widened as Dr. Evans extracted another tiny, squirming baby. The initial stunned silence quickly gave way to organized chaos as nurses hurried to stabilize both infants. Luke's face was a mask of disbelief and joy, tears pooling in his eyes. Marielle's exhaustion melted away, replaced by overwhelming astonishment and relief. The impossible had happened. Against all odds, it was twins. The room buzzed with activity as the miracle of life unfolded before their eyes. Nurses rushed to stabilize both infants, one slightly larger and stronger than the other. The room buzzed with coordinated effort, each nurse and doctor perfectly in sync. Dr. Evans turned to Marielle and Luke, a triumphant smile breaking through his professional facade. The adrenaline in the room was palpable as they worked on ensuring the babies were all right. Marielle could barely breathe, her eyes glued to her tiny, squirming miracles. Luke squeezed her hand, his face a mix of wonder and relief. "Twins," Dr. Evans announced, his voice filled with relief and joy. Marielle felt tears streaming down her face, the weight of months of fear and uncertainty dissolving in an instant. She looked at Luke, whose face mirrored her astonishment and joy. Every breath she took was a mix of laughter and tears. Luke leaned down, kissing her forehead gently. "You did it," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. The revelation hung in the air like a joyful cloud, enveloping them both. She looked at Luke, sharing a moment of pure, unfiltered joy. The ultrasound that had once revealed a terrifying mystery was now a memory fading into the background. It had been twins all along. Marielle laughed through her tears, feeling an overwhelming sense of relief wash over her. Luke's eyes sparkled with disbelief, shaking his head as if trying to grasp the reality of it. "Two," he said softly, almost to himself. "We have two beautiful babies." Marielle and Luke couldn't believe their eyes. The mixed emotions of relief and joy filled the room as they finally met their two beautiful, healthy babies. Each tiny face was a testament to the incredible journey they had endured. The room felt warmer, lighter, filled with newfound love and hope. Marielle held both babies close, their soft cries and little movements making her heart swell. Luke touched each tiny hand, his expression one of pure amazement. The doctors congratulated them, providing quick updates on the baby's stable conditions. Marielle felt overwhelmed but grateful for the turn of events. Every word of praise and reassurance from the medical staff felt like a balm to her weary soul. Luke couldn't stop thanking everyone, his smile never fading. The journey had been harrowing, but the outcome was beyond what they had dared to hope for. Marielle's heart was full, her mind finally at ease. Luke's joy was evident as he held one baby while Marielle held the other. They whispered words of love and promises to be the best parents they could be. Each moment felt surreal, the culmination of their fears and hopes realized in these two tiny beings. The room was filled with contented coos and sighs. Luke kissed Marielle softly, the gravity of their journey binding them even closer. Their tiny family was complete, fragile, but full of promise. Over the next few days, they adjusted to their new reality, grateful for the intensive care the babies received. The medical team closely monitored the twins, ensuring they were healthy and strong. Marielle and Luke took turns holding and feeding them, learning the ropes of parenthood under the gentle guidance of the nurses. Each day, the twins grew stronger, their cries more assertive, their eyes more alert. The hospital room began to feel a bit like home. Marielle and Luke finally brought their twins home, ready to embark on this new chapter as a family of 4. The journey had been tough, but it was worth it. The car ride was surreal, a mix of anxiety and excitement. They set up the babies in their carefully prepared nursery, a room that had waited patiently for them. Despite their fears, the joy in their hearts was undeniable. Their home was filled with tiny cries and endless love. As they settled into their life with their twins, Marielle felt a deep sense of peace. They had made it through a harrowing experience, and now they had twice the love to show for it. The days were long and the nights even longer, but every moment was precious. Luke and Marielle took turns, each learning and growing alongside their newborns. The journey had been unpredictable, but now their future looked brighter than ever.